Tosin gave a little hand check to Jota. Very similar to the Saliba one optics-wise.
The Tosin one at Anfield was different. They're basically in the same position on the pitch, that's absolutely true. Levi Colwill was really close to Tosin when he brought down Jota. That's your cover. The cover for Arsenal, I think, was Ben White, and he was on the other side of the pitch.
We back like Lonzo Ball for week 8 of your Premier League. A weekend of 5 red cards, 2 head wounds, what felt like far too many refereeing controversies, autumnal sun, and that rare but quite life-affirming sight of goalkeepers in baseball caps, which honestly was a balm to the angst and fury. Almost made it just fade away. There's something very humanising about seeing Vicario in a baseball cap. He's so cute. And to break it all down, Liverpool highs, Arsenal agony, Spurs fans, you deserve happiness too. And Manchester United, hugs all round on this day. It's a joy to welcome back from the storm-filled hill country around Harrogate, that poet trapped as the Mike Schmidt of football at the New York Times. It's my friend. Hello, gorgeous. It's Rory Smith.
How are you doing?
Oh, Raw, better for seeing your beautiful face. What was the highlight of the Rory Smith week?
Well, an interesting little trip up to South Shields, which is kind of between Sunderland and Newcastle the other day, in the northeast corner. That's windswept hill country. To meet some Americans who are playing for South Shields International Academy, and they have been drawn across to what is essentially quite a random town in the northeast of England, just by the romance, the appeal of just playing soccer in England. And I find it astonishing. I met a kid from Canton, Ohio, if that makes sense to anybody, which is, I think, as far from South Shields as it is possible to get. And yet here he was playing football in the sort of northeast. They'd had a big game against Chesterfield, and the glamour was just kind of just dripping with glamour, Rog.
God, the power of the Goal movie franchise. Everybody wants to be Santi. That's the only logical conclusion I can take of that. And talking about entertainment power, the wattage coming out from England this week. While a truly dreadful Australian remake of The Office is currently being unleashed on a quite unwanted world, there's news, I can't quite believe this, of a British Cheers reboot in development. This is so random. According to The Guardian, they call it, quote, the most stupidest TV idea yet. For many of you who don't even know what it was because you're so young, Cheers was a ratings powerhouse, a stone cold classic in the 1980s. I actually wrote about it in my memoir. The bar in the original Boston version was such a life-affirming place. It's one of many reasons I actually ended up moving here to America, to be honest. But Rory, when you think about this, Cheers in Britain, British pubs are infinitely more depressing than American bars. The idea is doomed to fail, isn't it?
Yeah, if you want to make a TV show about people who regularly go to the pub like every day in Britain, that is not a comedy. That's a dark television program. It's not a dark comedy. It's drama. It's kind of the work of an auteur. It's depressing. It's sort of miserablest. There was a Guardian piece about it that you sent me that I thought kind of captured it. There is a TV show about people who regularly go to the pub in Britain. It's called Early Doors, and it's amazing. They could just re-air that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a British show about people who go to the pub every day. It's called EastEnders. It's called Coronation Street. It's every tragic soap opera in Britain where they offer them up to a nation to say, you think your life's terrible? These people's lives are even worse, so stop your moaning. The bar, by the way, in the original Cheers was known as the place where everyone knows your name. I think the English Cheers is going to be the bar where everyone hates you, wants to steal your wallet, sells you some coke, and kicks your teeth in the toilet. Actually, that's probably the pitch, don't you think, Ro?
That would capture the experience of going to the pub in 2024. Yeah, that's what pubs are for nowadays.
I'm back in. I like it. Show me the pilot, will you? And talking of bars, I do want to raise a toast. Oh, that's good. To one Thomas Tuchel, who deserves this. My first Michelob Ultra of the day, by virtue of becoming the New England manager. I still can't believe this. It's akin to voluntarily sticking your hand in a threshing machine. Tommy Tuchel, he's your new German dad. A German running England. In many ways, it's a little bit like the Battle of Britain was all for naught from the eyes of the English media in some quarters. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. A massive statement by the Football Association, one that says, well, many things seismic, depending, I think, where you stand. Definitely something about the state of coaching in the national game. One that has instantly turned up the Daily Mail angometer from its perpetual state of incandescent to, I think, around road rage. Well, there was a line I read this week. The birthright of the country which gave football to the world is being sold. How can a foreigner urge Englishmen to do or die on football's battlefield? These are real lines, by the way. This is my favourite. That three-lion heart is still beating. Don't run for politics, whoever wrote that. But these are real sentences, and I wanted to inject some calm by saying, where are you, Raw? Is Thomas Tuchel the ultimate cup manager, so it makes sense for a team that need that last step? Or is it a desperate move? Only time will tell. But this debate about why not an English manager in that position should probably be a bit more reflective. Why don't we produce English coaches of Tuchel's standard? Could be the question you ask. But Roar, where are you?
I think on a sporting level, really hard to argue against the merit of the appointment. He's clearly an elite coach. And look, all the tall countries these days have got former Chelsea managers in charge. We know that. That is how that works.
Emma Hayes, you trendsetter, you.
I think the way that the Mail and various other people who are that way leaning, the way they framed it is really unhelpful. Just there is a really sensible and quite nuanced conversation to be had about not just why England doesn't produce coaches of that quality, not just about kind of the role the Premier League plays in shaping the identity of the English national team and whether we've got that balance right between the strength of club soccer and international soccer, about the expectation levels of England fans, but also about kind of the point of international football. Like, should a major nation be appointing a foreign coach? I'm not 100% certain. I think they should. I think it's a massive admission of defeat, certainly for a major nation that expects to win a trophy. The US, I will admit, is a grey area. But the main thing that now...
You're off to be a grey area.
I've got to say, the thing I keep thinking about most of all is I'm not sure any country in the world, including Brazil, is as obsessed with winning the World Cup as England. I think it's become a slightly problematic thing that, like, we pretend there are these layers of irony in football's coming home, and in kind of, we know really that we're not going to win it, but we just like to cosplay as this ambitious country that's got these big ideas. But I think a lot of it is rooted in that sense of, this is our game. I think that cuts through a lot more English soccer conversation than we give it credit for.
God, it's so fascinating, Ro. There's an agony of not winning it, but I think part of the English psyche is almost to love living that agony perpetually. Steve Coogan, I've talked about that quote so many times. If you give any English person a choice between their own success and your failure, they'll choose your failure every time. Something so validating. Going back to the soap opera thing, the English soap operas, American ones, they're about Dallas, dynasty, glamour, success, money. Those optics. English soap operas are about misery, just failure, just dismal lives. We're more comfortable with that. And that's honest truth is, every single English national team coach is set up to fail. They always find that weak point and just hammer away at it until it becomes very real. So Godspeed to you, Tommy Tuchel, you madman. This video podcast is brought to you by Camarena, the most awarded tequila. And if you're watching this on YouTube, remember to hit that subscribe button, turn your notifications on so you don't miss any of our upcoming podcasts and our exclusive interviews with Premier League stars all season long. But there's been lots of football. So much happened since we last spoke, Raw. So let's dive in. Before we do, quick word. Tomorrow on the Men in Blazers Media Network, launch a new series I actually love on our Men in Blazers YouTube channel. It's called Running the Game. It's a series of interviews with some of the brightest minds in football that go deep on the business side, the leadership side, the boardroom strategy, the culture building. You don't need your Wharton MBA. This series has got you covered when it comes to actual leadership. This week, we talk with Ipswich Town CEO Mark Aston, quite remarkable man, who has fueled the rise at Ipswich Town from League One mediocrity to the Premier League. I find the story quite fascinating. Go to our YouTube, hit subscribe, turn on those notifications. Make sure you do not miss an episode. Raw, have you been to Ipswich? How would you describe it to the viewing masses?
Well, I've been twice. Once was to Portman Road for a game a long, long time ago. I think they were in the Championship at that point. It's a great stadium, proper kind of English stadium. 4 separate stands, great atmosphere. Always sunny from my memory. Maybe that was just the one time I went.
No,
and then
on the evidence of the one time, it's always sunny.
100. It's sunny 100% of the time in Ipswich. And the other time was to cover a murder. So probably not a fair assessment of Ipswich as a town, to be honest.
Were you just sleuthing?
Sleuthing is one word for it. Yeah, it was before I was a sports reporter.
Who did that murder? Was it Michael Keane?
It wasn't. It was not a Michael Keane. We should stress for legal reasons, Michael Keane has never even been associated with a murder.
He kind of committed one this week, Raw, and it was magnificent. But we'll get to that as we dive on it. Thank you for dealing with the litigation.
I really feel that saved you a bullet there.
Rory Smith, both host and also HR and legal representative, General Counsel for the Men in Blazers Media Network. Well, let's dive in before I get myself into trouble. Let's start with this weekend's blockbuster dust-up, and it did not disappoint. Liverpool Football Club 2, Chelsea 1. A moment for both sides of contender or pretender. Really felt like a moment of truth. In different ways, top of the table, Arne Slot's Liverpool, 1 loss all season, but facing a quality of opposition in the league they had not really. Their 6 league wins had all come against teams none higher than 11th, so it felt like charging into this one. They were almost like 400-metre runners, so far ahead after the first lap, but only because they had the outside lane and confused optics of some kind of a staggered start. Chelsea, though, had won a remarkable 5 straight away. Chippy Chips in 4th place, had their own bona fides to prove. Good news for them. Reece James back for the first time in 315 days of injury. Suspensions, yes, probably forced that return. Cucurella and Fofana both out. By the way, I loved how much Enzo talked about going into this one, just how much he'd studied Klopp's Liverpool over and over as a manager. I interviewed Arne Slot this week, and he said the same about Pep Guardiola's City. These elite managers, so bloody familiar with their opponent's tactical depths now. Perhaps that's why the beginning was cagey, edgy. Chelsea showing they weren't intimidated by Anfield. Liverpool marauding in transition. One wave of which came to an early end. Diego Jota toppled by Tosin on the break. We'll talk more about that decision when we get to Arsenal, because otherwise this pod could just become a kind of post-mortem inquest of one refereeing decision after another, like a Mike Dean memorial tribute. But don't worry, Arsenal fans, we got you. Game came to light when a penalty not given for a coming together between Salah and Colwill led to a minute later. Colwill, perhaps adrenaline-fueled, ill decision-making, clipped Curtis Jones in the area. Penalty, Salah. Oh, no man loves scoring against a team that brought him and dumped him more than him with nary a care. Sanchez went the wrong way. 8th goal for Mo against Chelsea Raw. God, he loves celebrating against that club. I think 7th goal in 11 games this season for Mo. Just another arrow released from the quiver. He is so consistently great.
Yeah, I was watching it actually thinking, I wonder, when he was waiting to take the penalty, I was thinking, I wonder if he'll celebrate. I couldn't actually remember if Salah celebrated against Chelsea. And then obviously he did celebrate. And it made me think, is there like a statute of limitations on how long you have to have been away from a club before the I won't celebrate against you, my former team celebration no longer has to kind of apply? Salah's not been a Chelsea player for 11 years, maybe? 10 years? So surely that's long enough. Like, Chelsea fans can't be offended at the prospect of Mo Salah celebrating against them. His consistency is astonishing. I think he's turned into a slightly different type of player over the last 18 months. He's not the sort of wide-ranging poacher that he was. He's not quite as effective in front of goal. He's not quite as ruthless as he was at his very best. But I think he's a much more creative force now. Seems to be adding to continue the strained metaphor, arrows to his quiver. In fact, not quivers to anything, arrows to his quiver, in terms of the array of passes he's got, in terms of the things that he can do, the positions he takes up. He's not perhaps as spectacular a player as he was, say, 5 years ago, but I do wonder if he's a bit more complete.
Yeah, it's fascinating watching him. He is, even as the front threes, the fearsome front threes change, perpetual change for Liverpool. He is that one constant, almost the brain, the continued, almost the history of that front three. And God bless, let him celebrate like Saquon Barkley. But Jadon Sancho immediately had a penalty claim turned down again. But in that first half, Chelsea had Cole Palmer just going deeper and deeper, almost to try and scratch out any kind of influence. Sancho, it's got to be said, was well marshalled, yes, defensively by Trent Alexander-Arnold. Nico Jackson scraped the outside of the post, but Liverpool kept threatening in transition. Szoboszlai almost ran out of steam when he was through. Seconds after John Champion reminded us Liverpool haven't conceded a first half goal all season, a quite open Cole Palmer lashed one over, uncharacteristically from the area you would and he would expect Cole Palmer to score. They actually had a ton of possession in the Liverpool area, 18 touches in Liverpool's box just in that first half alone, the most by a visiting team at Anfield in a Premier League game in over 4 years. But oddly in this game, Raw, in key moments, blunt.
Yeah, I think that Liverpool are actually quite good at not allowing their opposition good quality shots. And the one exception from that first half is probably the Palmer effort, where he took up what is quite a Cole Palmer position, 15, 16 yards out inside the box at a slight angle on his left foot with the whole goal to aim at. I'm not a football manager, but I think you probably don't want Cole Palmer doing that. And they kind of got away with it a bit. Does he put it just over, only narrowly? But other than that, I think Liverpool seemed willing to cede possession, to an extent cede territory, and even to allow Chelsea, or to accept the idea that Chelsea are a really good team and therefore will have chances. And they seem to have set their defenders out, not so much to try and staunch the flow of chances, but to make sure those chances were low quality. And I think for the most part, they did that. For all the ball Chelsea had, it never felt like there was a siege.
Only low quality chances, lads. That must have been the motto the Liverpool back four shared before taking the field. And we wondered how both managers would tweak at half-time. Maresca flung on the more tactically versatile Pedro Neto for Sancho, tried to speed up possession, and whatever the chess-playing ball king said worked, because within 142 seconds, Nico Jackson, off the shoulder of Canate, who got caught in two minds trying to play him offside, kept him on, while allowing Nico to roar forward, and under pressure from Andy Robertson, a very adept finish going to Kelleher's left. Those who still think of Nico Jackson just as a meme lord, well, they're not wrong, but he also scores goals too. Still raw, lots of talk after the game, and I'm surprised by this, of how Chelsea still need that massive, versatile, multi-dimensional goal machine of kind of the Osimhen ilk raw. But Nico has quietly got 5 goals and 3 assists in the first 8 games so far. Yeah,
his goal record over the last year, say, is really, really good. And I don't know to what extent this feels a bit like a kind of predictable, like just as I'm just playing the hits all the time. But I do wonder to what extent, like we look at Haaland at City, and we've kind of decided what every team needs is someone to score 50 goals a season. And obviously every team would like to have someone who scores 50 goals a season, but there's not that many of them out there. And yeah, like Osimhen's probably better in the air than Jackson. He might be slightly quicker, he might be slightly stronger, but he's also quite a lot older and hugely expensive. So if you can't get him, then maybe you just have to work with the raw material that Jackson very clearly has.
When you said hugely expensive, I think you got the interest of Chelsea's brain trust. They weren't interested until you said that. Now they are most certainly in January. And we wondered how Liverpool would respond to that punch in the face. And the honest answer was impressively, impeccably. Because just 262 seconds, a lot of counting by me this weekend after conceding, and that included the VAR check after Jackson's goal. Mo Salah wafted coolly and quite cruelly in from the right. Liverpool players were scattered all over the box in front of him. Somehow He spotted, it was almost Vulcan mind meld with Curtis Jones, a Scouser in the team. Gent who's clearly been given a boost in confidence by Arne Slot. And Mo arced that ball, not to the man, but into space. Curtis's first touch, honestly a little heavy. But Robert Sanchez mesmerised on his line. Chelsea have like 8 goalkeepers on their books and yet somehow deem Sanchez to be the best one. I just don't know. And in charge Curtis stabbed home cue scenes and noise and wonder as Jones reeled away. I'm a horrible man. I'm dead inside, especially when it comes to Liverpool Football Club. But to see a local lad who would have grown up watching games on the Kop now living out his dreams, scoring massive goals in front of it raw, it was beautiful.
Yeah, and it's actually testament to an extent to the patience of the club and to the perseverance of Jones, because I think there's been a long time where a lot of fans kind of felt that Curtis Jones wasn't quite what they wanted him to be, that he wasn't the international quality world-class midfielder that they felt Liverpool needed. And I think that's often a fate that befalls like homegrown talents, that because you see them emerge from 17, 18, you see them work through all the flaws that they will necessarily have in their game in all but the rarest of instances. Like Rooney arrived fully formed at Everton, but I mean I think Wayne Rooney was born with the body of a 28-year-old striker. But most people aren't like that, and most of the time they kind of have to work through, they have to win their place, they make mistakes, they get dropped for a bit, and it's a bit up and down to come through and establish yourself. I now would say Curtis Jones is very clearly of the quality of midfielder that Liverpool need. I don't, or not even Liverpool, but a title-winning team or a title-challenging team needs. Curtis Jones is of that level without a shadow of a doubt. He can kind of do everything. He's got a lovely ability to drop a shoulder. He's energetic and he's dynamic, but that sounds limiting. It turns him into a kind of a great big diesel engine, but he's not that. He's got real subtlety to his game, real grace to his game. It's really hard to watch Curtis Jones and think that there will still be lots of Liverpool fans who think he's not good enough. I don't quite know how much money you'd have to pay to get a midfielder who is much better, like significantly better than Curtis Jones.
Oh God, I love that image of baby Wayne Rooney coming out of the womb, just cracking open a beer, lighting a cigarette and going off to score goals.
You say you love that. I mean, I'd say that is terrifying.
Yeah, and probably not too far from my vision's probably more the truth than yours, but It does lead us to remember that an additional lovely moment for Curtis Jones. He just became a dad for the first time last weekend, father of a baby girl, Giselle Delilah Jones. He also largely shackled Cole Palmer for long periods in this game. By the way, I loved how the gent made it clear when footballers have babies, they don't always want to talk about them because they don't want to give fans any excuse to say, oh, he's gone off since he had the ... A lot of the players have talked about it and then decided they don't want to talk about it anymore. But he made it clear that he slept in the spare room the night before the game, which I just love. But that goal also belonged to Mo Salah. As we talked about, that still that definitive player in key moments in that front three, an assist and a goal now in 34 Premier League games. I think only Wayne Rooney, fully formed baby Wayne Rooney with 36 has more. For Mo, goal, tick, assist, tick, new hair system bedding in very, very beautifully, tick, tick, tick. I think that's called the Turkish hair transplant factory hat-trick rule.
Yeah, but the transformation in late career, like autumnal Salah, is really impressive because he was the sort of player, I think, when he was scoring those ridiculous numbers of goals in his first few years at Liverpool, who you would have looked at and thought, okay, there is such a key component to his game that is physical. It's his raw speed, but also it's his ability to dribble at pace. It was those darting runs. It was the close ball control when in full flight. All of those are physical things, and those things fade, as fully formed baby Wayne Rooney proved that if you are kind of not reliant, that's not fair on Rooney, but if those are your strong suits, that as you get older, they tend to become slightly diminished because of the ravages of time.
Once the pace goes, you can be found out. You watch Salah yesterday. I was shocked just how strong he was. So many moments when he should have been knocked off the ball, and just like a running back, he kind of powered through and delivered the hits rather than just absorbing them.
And then you think about the outside of the boot pass that Salah's developed over the last, I think, 18 months, really, maybe 2 years at the outside. There were a couple yesterday that didn't quite lead to goals, but there was one for Szoboszlai that probably should have led to a much better chance than it did. That's something that he seems to have deliberately added into his game. He's worked out, look, I can't always cut inside, so I need an alternative. I need something else that I can do to keep the defenders on their toes. And what he does is play these brilliantly sort of whipped balls with the outside of his left foot. I mean, you could just use your right, Mo. Maybe that's something to work on. But that has given him a sort of creative edge as well. He's no longer just a finisher.
It's like Jordan adjusting his shot, the fadeaway, later in his career. My friend, the fault is in our Stars writer John Green tweeted, things that get better with age, Mo Salah's football, Mo Salah's hairline, truth and truth. And this was now engrossing fare. If it was a chess game, it's more like chess boxing that you sometimes see on YouTube. And we were in the middle game. Substitutions started to flow in. Maresca protecting Reece James and Lavia from injury. Luis Diaz coming on for Gakpo. It remained a truly combative affair. Heft, velocity, power. Chelsea perhaps paid a price at times for just expecting Cole Palmer to, in Joe Hart's words, make the magic happen. Vega late on headed over their best chance from a CP20 cross. I'm trying to make that happen. And that was it. Defeat, just the second of the season for Chelsea. They lost in the first game to City, now to Liverpool. I think a number of Chelsea fans zeroed in on the poor refereeing in this one, and they may have a case. But Raw, I think the leitmotif of the performance was really courage, hunger, confidence. I think they can take so much from this as it's still young, Raw side, still gelling together. It's got to be said, that self-inflicted pressure of the $1 billion or so that has created this kind of artificially original squad bloat. Maresca, as a competitive creature, will be disappointed, but don't you think they'll draw courage from this before his Blues host Newcastle and then go to United and then host Arsenal? These three big games that lie ahead of these. It was one of those games where if you played a series of 10, Liverpool might have won 5.5 out of the lot.
Yeah, I think the mood music from Chelsea afterwards seemed strikingly positive. And for a club that's only really known crisis ever since, February 2022, but even before that, under Abramovich, any defeat always seemed like a sort of skies falling in moment, because that was the way the club was geared. As you say, that they are operating and have been operating under this self-inflicted pressure. For Maresca to come out afterwards and say, look, there's a lot to build on in this performance. For Pedro Neto to really accentuate the fact that Chelsea went to Anfield and asserted themselves. They went to a team that finished third last year, that was miles ahead of them 6 months ago, that is very much kind of what they're aiming to catch, certainly before they start scaling the mountain of catching Manchester City. There are huge numbers of positives for Chelsea, and all of the credit for that goes to Enzo Maresca. Maybe a little bit to Cole Palmer.
CP20.
That's not going to work, Rog. This huge mess that Bowley and Ed Barley and Clear Lake and all the various other people have made of Chelsea's squad, with this big, grand, disruptive Silicon Valley plan to be cleverer than everybody else. And he's named the same attacking lineup, I think, for the last month and a half in the league. There is now a clear shape to Chelsea. It changed against Liverpool because of the South American World Cup qualifiers, because Enzo Fernandez was clearly either not fully fit or hadn't fully recovered from all the travel.
In the same way as Luis Diaz and Alexis
and McAllister didn't play for Liverpool. So they both managers clearly decided, right, these players got back way too late. They are not going to be able to do 90 minutes. Other than that Chelsea attacking lineup is set. Injuries and suspensions and stuff have kind of made the back line a little bit more chaotic, and I'm not sure Maresca's fully settled on how he wants to line up at the back yet. But for all the bloat of the squad, you kind of know now. It's one of those old truisms, and English football went through a really difficult period 10 years ago or so, where it had to break itself of this logic. But there always used to be this idea that you needed to know your best 11, that a manager had to know their best 11. And it seems really old-fashioned now. And it's quite quaint, because obviously you've got a squad of 23 players, and you can shift things tactically to suit the opposition. And maybe this week you want a bit of pace out wide, but next week you might want an extra midfielder in there. Like, we're used to that now. We're not stupid. We have learned. But with Chelsea, I do think there's a real case that they needed to know their best 11. And Enzo Maresca, within reason, seems to know his best 11, and that's basically what he's working from.
Todd Burley, you've still got the Dodgers. Significant win from Liverpool's perspective for Arne Slot. Still top of the table, beginning to define their true weight class as challengers. Tenacious enough to smother Chelsea's free-scoring squad, end that perfect away record. What I found fascinating was hearing Anfield so loud again, honestly louder than I've heard it since Klopp left, under quite untheatrical, stoic Arne Slot, who the results ultimately speak for themselves. He's like a Dutch DJ Khaled. 7 wins on the bounce. 10 wins out of 11. I actually spent time with Arne last week for an interview, which is up on our YouTube. I found him to be really self-assured, so confident in his own skin, which is a very hard thing to do for any manager. A lot of ego in management, but particularly post-Klopp, to be not insecure about how you measure up, but to almost embrace it, aware of what he's inherited, confident to know in his own ability that he can build. It is remarkable. I don't know if Liverpool recruited him because of that apparent lack of ego, but it is very, very rare in football, Rob.
It's unusual, isn't it, to find a self-assured Dutchman? It's not something you associate with them at all. Yeah, I mean, you do. By the way, you're making a joke there, but it is. It's like the Louis van Gaal arrogance that we know. There's a very vain, arrogant streak in the traditional Dutch kind of management, or at least the ones that come over to the United Kingdom. Yeah, I think the Dutch would say they're very direct and very, very blunt, and they don't kind of mess around. I think that can often play as arrogance, particularly in Britain, where we are much more deferential and we tend to be slightly more mealy-mouthed about things. Slot, everyone at Liverpool says the thing about Arne Slot is how unassuming he is, how clear a communicator he is, how personable he is. And people who work at the club have said to me that he doesn't really feel like a manager, because that is a big old position, being Liverpool manager. It's he's one of the most successful people in his field in the world. And even if it all goes bum over elbow at Liverpool, then he will still be one of the most successful people in his position in the world. He has risen to a level that most managers will never get close to. But they talk about him as though he's just kind of a normal bloke who comes in and he kind of arranges training, does the tactics, picks the team, wins a football match, goes home. And I think to retain that, even as he's risen up through the ranks of management, is genuinely impressive, to retain that level of humility and apparent modesty without being overcome by self-doubt. Just the reason that managers mostly seem arrogant is because you have to be to take that much pressure on yourself. You can't be riddled with self-doubt like me and you, Rog, and manage a football team. I currently am an assistant coach.
That's just one of many limitations, Rog. I just want to make that clear.
I'm currently an assistant coach for an under-7s team, and I am so addled with self-doubt that I'm considering resigning. But to get to managing a Premier League team level, you have to be.
Apparently, Roy Hodgson's eyeing your position.
He'd do a better job than me. You have to be self-assured. You have to be absolutely adamant, basically, that you're right about everything all the time. The skill in remaining a decent person whilst believing that is in knowing that there is kind of a separate professional you and personal you. And Slot seems to have that, and I think it's working for Liverpool because the team isn't as emotionally kind of fraught as it was under Klopp. Every game doesn't feel like such a seismic event as it did certainly in Klopp's last season. Slot is very undemonstrative on the touchline, and I think all that stuff's quite important. I don't know whether Liverpool factored in, we need not a change of style, but we maybe need a change of character to their process. But it wouldn't shock me if that was something they considered, the idea that if you went and got someone who was a bit like Klopp, what you might end up with is lots of people thinking, well, this fella's just a pale imitation of what we had before. Whereas under Slot, it feels as though there's a different type of leadership to get used to get accustomed to, and to kind of start to get excited about.
If they got a Klopp light, it would almost be like a Klopp tribute brand, Rule.
Yeah, kind of like Oasis.
Exactly like Oasis.
The superior version of Oasis.
They've almost gone for the opposite. And when we had Soboslai come on 2 weeks ago, I asked him what it's like, not having Klopp kind of theatrically conducting the atmosphere, and instead having this quite stoic human being on the line. He goes, I'll look at a man who has a plan and we are acting upon it, which is quite fascinating insight into how footballers' mentality work. By the way, I'd just love to hear more about you coaching a 7-year-old team. I just want to know how the 7-year-old team responded when you had the team dinner and hired some pickpockets to just maraud around and
take away their Nerf guns.
By the way, back on the slot post game, I loved what he said. Don't judge us after this game, judge us after the next 7. He talked about the biggest test is playing Premier League and Champions League every 3 days. Let me remind you of Liverpool's next 11 games: Leipzig away, Arsenal home, Brighton in the Carabao Cup, and then in the league, Leverkusen, Villa, Southampton, Real Madrid, Man City, Newcastle, and then Everton away. And apart from that last game, it's a pretty brutal run. But it's time to check in at the Heartbreak Hotel that was Wolves 1, Manchester City 2. This game last year was the one in which that Korean guy Hwang handed City their first defeat of last season. How times have changed. Wolves, 1 point all season, 1 win in the last 17. Going into this game, honestly, it felt like Wolves were about to be thrown to the wolves after being smashed by Brentford in the last game. Beleaguered Gary O'Neill had changed to a back 3 for the first time this season, kept things compact, hoped that his players' physicality and ability to lob a ball over the back Newcastle style could prickle City, who tore at them. But very first Wolves attack, City made to look worse. Dan a Saturday Night Live Oasis skit, 7 minutes, ball lashed out wide to Semedo. He had time to arrow in a ball behind City's rear guard. And Strand Larsen, that Norwegian guy, stabbed home off his shin. Honestly, felt as close as I've ever seen to watching a man poke a bear live on television. 4 of their 8 games now, Raw, Man City have conceded first. They've gone on to win them all. That is a spoiler alert. But why, Raw? Why are they leaking?
Well, I don't really know. I suppose the obvious thing to say is Rodri. That without Rodri there, they maybe don't have quite the same control as they showed for the last X number of years when Rodri was there, when they never lost a game. But I'm not sure that fully explains it. It's not like they've not replaced Rodri. There are people playing in that position who are also incredible footballers. I remember thinking late last week, before this round of fixtures, that the one thing that made me worry a little bit about Arsenal at Bournemouth was the fact that Arsenal had made heavy weather of Leicester and Southampton in the last couple of weeks before the international break. And that just makes you think, well, that's not a great sign if you're kind of struggling if you're having to rouse yourself to beat teams that you should be dispatching relatively easily. And with City, I do wonder, obviously scoring late winners, coming from behind, not losing to Arsenal in dramatic fashion, etc. That all looked to us like the hallmarks of champions. And because it's Man City, that is the likeliest explanation, that this is just Man City being Man City. They never know they're beaten. They're better than everybody else. They find a way. But I'm not sure it's a great trait to need to have that level of drama, to be conceding goals first, to be conceding goals more often than they were in previous seasons. Just City's success has been built on really, really solid defending. It does just suggest that something's not quite right. That's the good news. The bad news, they're not losing games. They're still unbeaten. They're the only unbeaten team left in England. And also, they always do this in autumn, and then they solve the problem, and they go and win 17 games in a row.
In football, just to paraphrase what you just said, Raw, in football, there's no romance. The team with the biggest balance sheet almost always wins. Yet, with cognitive dissonance, we let ourselves never learn that. We always dream. And even though needed an enormous block from Ederson to repel Semedo one-on-one, City continue to be wide open in transition. 33 minutes, master blaster from Gvardiol. We've talked about him before. Just a blood-thumping finisher. Did it in City's last away game at Newcastle. We praised him then too. Praise him again now. It was his weaker foot, I think, from Sabrina Ionesco range. No defender scored more goals in the Premier League than him since he arrived in August 2023. Not even Michael Keane. Beautiful Michael Keane. Get onto him in a minute. But the game was like cat and mouse, honestly. An enormous Siberian tiger facing up to an admirable yet tiny Eurasian harvest mouse. Wolves tried to parry. Flicker still on the counter. They counted on their keeper, Sarr, who was so adept in keeping this close. Scampered to keep the ball out low on repeat. Haaland, goalless since telling Arsenal to stay on belay. Which is close as we might ever come to proving the existence of karma. It got desperate, let's be candid, late on for Wolves. Nunez came on, great trolling by Pep, well done Pep. Tore into his former teammates without remorse, 18 corners, the most this season, and off the very last for City, 95th minute, Foden made breaks. John Stones takes with a very fine header, but drama, tragedy, farce, glory off that set piece, because we've got to get into it raw. While the ball was still in flight from the corner, remember you can't be offside from a corner, very sly move by Bernardo Silva. He backed into the keeper, little Bernardo, before the Stones header, and he twerked on the aforementioned keeper. That's what he did. They must have loved that in training. Twerk, Bernardo, twerk. But then Bernardo Silva, being that intelligent footballer, was smart enough to quickly duck out the way before the Stones header when the offside would have become live. Raw, this was just an incredibly tiny bit of design housing by a very small man, as John Stones then leapt up, powered the ball home. Goal was originally ruled out for offside before Chris Kavanagh, the referee, overturned the decision after a VAR review. What did you make of it all? Help us understand this moment. Help bail out referee Chris Kavanagh in this second.
Well, I'd actually say it's not necessarily, designed housing by Bernardo. I think it's probably by Guardiola and his coaching staff. That strikes me as being a pre-planned routine that they will have worked out with City's set piece staff.
Absolutely. And the brilliance was putting the little man on it, because if it was a huge guy, the optics would have been very different. Huh?
Well, also, there's in terms of dropping and rolling, then it's harder for Erling Haaland to do that because he's taller. So you want the little fella who's closest to the ground. And also, I think it does. You're probably right. There's maybe an element, even subconsciously, I suspect, of like psychological warfare about it. That
it is, because they knew the pundits would be game's gone soft.
Yeah,
just the goalkeeper can't stand up to the tiny guy. Twerk, Bernardo, twerk.
Well, you saw I forget which City player it was, sort of ran up to the fourth official at the point while they were going through the VAR check, and made the internationally accepted hand gesture for he's only a little fella, but sort of putting your hand out by underneath your chin and something like that.
Miazga invented it, yeah.
As if to say, well, he can't possibly have been in the line of sight. City knew that the rule is that if you're not in the line of sight, you can't be offside. It won't count. So they have come up with a pre-planned routine to exploit that. Bernardo Silva nudges Jose Sarr. I like the description of twerking. Nudges Jose Sarr. So Jose Sarr is both off balance and distracted. He does it while the ball is in flight, so he's not interfering with play while he's offside. He's not offside from a corner. And as soon as the ball gets into the kind of central area where someone's meant to head it, in this case John Stones, Bernardo Silva rolls out of the way. That's all very clever. I'm not sure it's the sort of thing we should necessarily be applauding morally, but it's very clever. It feels like pushing the boundaries a little bit to me. It's letter of the law, not spirit of it type stuff.
It is grating. It is.
The thing that I found really kind of grating about it, whilst thinking unquestionably the goal should have stood, it was correctly awarded, is this sort of disingenuousness of almost presenting Bernardo Silva as though he was a bystander. Like he just happened to be there. Oh, was Bernardo there? Was he reading the paper? Was he having a smoke? Like, was he just sort of standing around in that general area? How unfortunate. That was a pre-planned routine designed to exploit a loophole in the rules. And presenting it as anything otherwise is a little bit gaslighty for me.
The scenes as the goal was given, City players charging round, they're like kids given a snow day off school, agony for Wolves at the same time. Remember, it was Wolves 6 months ago who stood up against the use of VAR technology. They wanted it gone, and here they were seconds away from a possible season-turning massive point. Their fans left to sing, "You cheating bastards, we know what you are." Honestly, an admirable performance. They should draw strength from this performance. They've gotten through a brutal gauntlet of a start fixture-wise. They've got Palace, Southampton, Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, West Ham, Ipswich, Leicester in 8 of their next 9 to come. I did find it fascinating. The manager, Gary O'Neill, talked about how he didn't say it was a terrible decision. He said ultimately his words were really fascinating. He actually asked if there's something in the subconscious that impacts referees. His words, without even knowing it, are you more likely to give it to Manchester City than Wolves? If you see a little guy and a big guy in a street, I'm going to upset the little guy. Maybe there's something in it that edges it in that direction when it's really tight.
I think that's definitely true. There's no way of proving it, and Gary O'Neill probably knows that. But I think that is true now, and I think it has always been true. I think there is an inbuilt, deep within the subconscious awareness that if you give a controversial decision against the big team, you receive a greater level of ire, let's say, than if you give a controversial decision in favour of the big team, and I'm pretty sure that referees wouldn't be human if they weren't in some way susceptible to that. In this case, I'm not sure how relevant it is, because as far as the laws as they are currently understood go, that goal should have stood.
God, Chris Kavanagh, hearing that, I'm a human being, not a monster. But let me rephrase it for you, Gary O'Neill. If you see a little guy or a big guy in a street or a guy wearing an Arsenal jersey, ... We'll get to you Arsenal fans in 1 second, but huge relief for Pep Guardiola after really a week of immense turmoil in which it was announced that City's director of football, Pep's close friend, Cheeky Begiristain, will leave at the end of the season. Pep, the intrigue continues about him. Will he, won't he sign a new contract? We now know he's not going to become, or he wasn't affirmative enough about his interest in becoming England manager. What happens there? We still have to see. And of course, City's vast legal teams menacing the rest of the league through assorted legal rumblings. But on the field, the team remains undefeated in 31 straight Premier League games, a new club record, chasing Arsenal's 2004 record of 49. I've got to say, though, the atmosphere after this one was less of wonder and spectacle, more of inevitability, just of a dulling, inevitable feeling. Another major game, another result in which refereeing stepped in, a backdrop at City of the loggerheads with the entire Premier League. On one hand, you can make the case the 4 times champions found a way in this one resiliently, but at full time, I just sat there raw. Feeling like I'd watched a reenactment of that Game of Thrones quote, I think it was Sansa Stark that said it, that there's no heroes in life, the monsters win.
Yeah, it felt very cruel on Wolves, because although, as you said before, it had got a bit desperate in the last 20 minutes, half an hour, they had gone into the game bottom of the table and they'd stood up to Man City, they'd had a game plan, and there were 1 or 2 chances where they maybe could have even scored again, taken the lead again, and it would have been the sort of result that galvanises a team for a season. I guess with City, you just have to say that they keep coming, that they find a way, even when they're not playing that sort of smooth, slick football that we associate with Man City. They will find a way to beat you.
Bernardo saying, boss, can I twerk? Can I do the twerking thing? Activate the twerking.
If it's not working, get twerking.
Oh my Lord, that's a very northern phrase. That is a Yorkshire phrase. If it ain't working, get twerking. That's a T-shirt that needs to not be made. CP20, back in time to Saturday's late game for a true October slasher movie level scary. Bournemouth 2, Arsenal 0. Oh, Arsenal took the field, knowing, like Whitney Houston, didn't they almost have it all? A chance to go top. This team of perpetual cherry killers. They always smash Bournemouth. I think they outbeaten them in the last 4 wins 13-2, but they were out without Bukayo Saka. Hamstring injury on duty with England. Arteta said it was a small tweak, but no point in rushing him back, right? With the Champions League and Liverpool next week. This was the first time Arsenal have started a Premier League game without Saka or Martin Ødegaard since the latter joined the club almost 4 years ago. Timber also out, and I don't know if it was the absences or the post-international window rust, but Arsenal seemed sluggish, seemed lacking in spark, inspiration from that start. They never really had control of the game. That was with 11 men. But we praised Arsenal for their preparation this season. We praised them for their attention to detail on set pieces. And we've also marvelled at times at their embracing of the dark arts, and the latter came back to burn them. 30 minutes in, Leandro Trossard misguidedly lofted the ball over his own backline. Evan Nielsen, quickest to react, charged over the halfway line. No one between him and the goal suddenly. Saliba, hot on his tail, gave him one of those little hand checks that at high speed lead to gravity kicking in. Red card seemed likely. Referee Rob Jones initially gave a yellow. His bull dad, PGMOL chief Howard Webb, looking on from the stands with phone and earpiece. VAR kicked in, which led to Saliba receiving his first ever top flight red, meaning he'll miss the meeting with Liverpool next week. Raw, can we agree first quickly? It was a foul. It was a risk taken by Saliba. Seen him given. But this is Arsenal's third red card in 8 games. And by the way, you see players kicking the ball away when free kicks are given now routinely. Poor Declan Rice died for their sins. How do you understand it?
Well, I think the only possible conclusion can be a vast underlying deep state conspiracy,
industrial level conspiracy,
to deny Arsenal the league title at the same time as
we
Arsenal are involved in another conspiracy in which they are on the side of the Premier League against Man City, and that it's all rigged against Man. I don't know. It's very confusing. I think. Look, do you know what? On the subject of the kicking the ball away, that's absolutely spot on. And if I was an Arsenal fan, which I'm not, I'd be really annoyed about it because Declan Rice and then Trossard were sent off for a rule that only seemed to apply in those two games. And it's astonishing that even after all the hullabaloo around it, that PGMOL and the referees in general have decided, actually, we don't really want to do that anymore, so we're not going to. This was a very red card heavy weekend. They are being very officious at the moment. But in those instances, there is clearly no consistency at all. And the fact that Arsenal suffered twice, I'm sure, is just coincidence. But I'd be furious. This one, first of all, let's establish the Tosin one at Anfield was different. And it was different for two reasons. One,
you're talking about yesterday. Tosin gave a little hand check to Jota. Very similar to the Saliba one, optics-wise, a yellow given. But you had Colwell in the vicinity, right?
So the two differences, one, they're basically in the same position on the pitch. That's absolutely true. Maybe a couple of yards difference. Levi Colwell was really close to Tosin when he brought down Jota. That's your cover. The cover for Arsenal, I think, was Ben White, and he was on the other side of the pitch. So there is no question at Bournemouth, Evan Nielsen is getting to that ball, and he's probably 99.9% getting a shot off before Ben White can get to it. I would say that's broadly true. Whether it's a goal-scoring opportunity when you're that far away from goal, I'm not entirely certain. But the two situations are distinctly, kind of markedly different. I feel it was a relatively harsh red card, but again, not a kind of incorrect one. Saliba pulled him down rather than let him run through on goal. The one thing that would have stopped Evan Nielsen getting through on goal and getting a shot off is probably the fact that Saliba's quicker than him. So I'm not quite sure he needed to do it. But even then, in that situation, I think you're making a calculation as a defender. And your calculation surely has to be, hang on, we're Arsenal. Even if I concede a goal from this position, then we're only 1-0 down with 60 minutes to play. It's a bit different if you're 0-0 and it's the 87th minute. Maybe you take the risk then. Maybe you think, okay, I don't have a choice here. If I let him go through and score, we are going to lose this game.
I think there's this much going on in footballers' heads in that second.
I think there is, because I think really talented.
Hang on, what minute?
It's sort of doing the galaxy brain thing, like kind of the 4D chess thing.
Yeah.
No, I think they are making calculations like that. I think players generally know you don't take risks early on in games because you may as well let the goal happen. And it's the same with giving away a penalty. That if you've got a player who's clean through on goal in the 10th minute, you're probably better off letting them score and then spending 80 minutes trying to get that goal back than you are getting sent off and not letting them score and then giving them the penalty anyway. I think players are making those calculations, and I think Saliba got it wrong. It was a harsh red. It wasn't an incorrect red. But the fact that he did it is the error. Shoddy risk assessment. Got to look at his risk assessment. Yeah. And I don't really know why. I mean, Evan Nielsen's quick and he's a really good player, but I think Saliba would have backed himself to catch him over 40 yards.
I'll back myself. That's what goes through footballers' brains. You just said it. That's the only phrase. I'll back myself.
I'll back myself to sort out this problem.
I've got to say, the one thing I'd say, the fact that Howard Webb, the referee chief, was there and immediately got on his phone with the earpiece, which you could make the case he was just doing his job, listening to the comms, just like someone in the commentary booth listens to the same comms. I think from an optics perspective, with all this furor about the refereeing and also in particular, just optics-wise, I would probably have not given the world that optic and would have chosen not to show my face at that game. But as it is, referee Rob Jones becomes the latest referee to join Arsenal fans' no-fly zone. It turns out he's from Liverpool, who's an ex-Premier League opponent. The Arsenal face, Raw.
But I'm sure that
Rob
Liverpool,
Jones, Raw.
I'm sure Rob Jones supports Tranmere or Marine.
That's what they always say.
Just like all those referees from Manchester support Altrincham.
Yep.
or
That's
Berry
it.
or whatever.
There's a
Liverpool,
graphic
going round.
They're playing Liverpool next, and Saliba will be suspended. Raw. I guess I'm asking, what if the conspiracy's real?
Well, there's a graphic going around that makes it look like an awful lot of referees are from the northwest, and the inference seems to be, just as Arsenal are involved in a conspiracy with the Premier League against Man City, but against the Premier League against Arsenal, that referees from the northwest all support all of the teams from the northwest, which in a way is just really sweet.
Develop your own referees, Arsenal. Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah,
Where's
come on,
the dearth of Arsenal
do you know what?
supporting? That's the real crisis in the game.
If the south of England can't produce people who have the natural authority to referee football matches...
Stop being hedge fund guys, south of England people. Stop making tons of cash. Be a referee and support your team properly. Is that what you're saying, Rook?
That's the only moral you can take from it.
GFOP Jill Rutledge wrote us a raven. Gil says, as an Arsenal fan, I have to say we were extremely lucky today. Upon review, there were 11 players wearing Arsenal kits, which, as we all know, is now a red card offence. It could have been worse. That's what it feels like. I do know that, Gil, because we have lived this so many times this year. Arsenal failed to win 2 games already this season. Leandro Trossard's second yellow against City. Declan Rice's little slide ball flicky against Brighton. Both times they were down to 10, it became all hands on deck. And here again, Raya flinging himself around. Arsenal so vulnerable. Lewis Cook running the Bournemouth midfield admirably. Substitutes changed the game. Iraola flung on 3 around the hour mark. 2 ended up scoring. By the way, only after Kepa cleaned up his own mistake, stopped Gabriel Martinelli up close in the 69th minute. Nice. 90 seconds later, off a wonderfully worked corner, no less. The irony. Am I right, Nicholas Jova? The ball worked in and around to wee Ryan Christie, who lashed low. Taste of your own medicine, baby. Face on Christie, like he couldn't believe it came off. It would get worse for Arsenal. 77 minutes, more self-inflicted wounds. Evan Nielsen charging onto a misheeled back pass from Kivior. Rounded Raya, brought him down with an Iberian crossbody block. Penalty, I've got to say, Kluivert's got a black belt in Ivan Toney no-look technique. That should count double when you don't look from a penalty. Suddenly, Bournemouth fans dancing. Singing the Saliba tequila song. Huge win for Bournemouth and their manager Iraola, who was I have to say this every time they play, a childhood friend of Mikel Arteta's. 2 grew up in the same Basque region around San Sebastian, played together on the youth team. I wonder if he knows how to say Dos a Cero in Spanish. Raw. Arsenal suffer their first loss of the season. Man City now our only unbeaten team. This was actually the first Arsenal away defeat of calendar year 2024. They have Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea next. It's going to be fascinating to see how they rebound, what they learn from it. What will they learn? Will it be that going down to 10 men consistently is, as Guy Ritchie would say, a dangerous game? That adversity feels even worse when it's self-inflicted? Or that playing without both Saka and Ødegaard is game-changingly difficult?
Well, it will be tricky against Liverpool because you certainly without Ødegaard and Saliba, Saka, I suspect, will be fit. Yeah, I suppose what we're finding out about Arsenal is that there is a degree of adversity going on. Arteta has said today, the day that we're recording, that they've only lost once this season. It's the first defeat. It's that a lot of the response has been a little bit excessive. The problem I think that teams have in the Premier League now, and Arsenal are finding it just as Liverpool did for 5 years, really, is that because you know what the Man City season looks like, a couple of draws in September, a little bit of hope, 17-game winning run starting in February, eventual Premier League title, it feels seismic whenever you drop points. And I think that leads to a certain almost type of panic. And I wonder if in some way, I'm probably reaching a bit here to be honest, but I do wonder if that kind of fed into Saliba making that decision that Arsenal will feel as though they have literally no room for error, that they can't drop any points at any point, because if you drop points, then suddenly City will seize the advantage, especially if they keep scoring last-minute winners. And I think it creates this sense of urgency and desperation in whoever's trying to compete with City. Yeah, like it's a form of mania. And I suppose what we'll see now over the next few weeks with Arsenal is how well they can kind of deal with that pressure. They're 3 points behind City, 4 points behind Liverpool. They can close that gap on Liverpool by beating them at the Emirates next Sunday. And then they and Liverpool both have really difficult runs of games. Do you know who doesn't have a difficult run of games? Manchester City.
So that's just City derangement syndrome, Raw. Can I just say, lovely to see my friend Tyler Adams back in the squad for the first time since May the 11th at the club level. We wish him strength and a real consistent run in that team. Godspeed, Tyler. Also back, Manchester United, Ten Hag's mob 2, Brentford 1. Got to say, watching Ten Hag tortured on the sideline at United, it's almost felt like a sadist convention this season. 8 points from 7 games, just 5 goals scored in that time. It was honestly odd watching Thomas Frank take to the field pre-game. It was like watching a man measuring up the feel of Old Trafford as his future home, as if it was some kind of an open house. For Ten Hag, keeping Brentford from scoring inside 2 minutes, Raw, that achievement, does it eclipse the FA Cup win in terms of forward progress?
Get it on the CV. Get it straight on the CV. Took Ajax to the Champions League semi-finals.
Yes.
Various Eredivisie championships.
They don't matter. Yeah, FA Cup.
Didn't concede within 2 minutes to Brentford.
Massive. Hired, say Fulham, in about 2 years' time. But that game was no smooth ride at the opening. Moment of controversy, 45 minutes plus 5. De Ligt off of a nasty head injury. Bandaged not once but twice. Blood still dripping through the bandage. Had to go off a third time. Those are the rules. That's why Daniel van der Donk wore the swim cap, people. That's all I'll tell you during the World Cup. And while he was off the third time, in his absence, Brentford corner against 10 men. Ethan Pinnock battered the header into the net. De Ligt on the sideline just booted the ball away in anger. But there was blood dripping down his face. United tried to quite pathetically argue that the blood was dry, so it shouldn't count. Raw, I'm not a doctor, but I do play one on TV. Can we agree this was self-inflicted by a quite inept medical staff shambles?
Yeah, I think there's a broader issue, isn't there, with football not really being willing to really engage with the idea that sometimes the players have got to go off. There's far too much empowerment of the players to make their own decisions. Strictly speaking, the medical staff should be saying either that was a heavy collision from head-to-head collision, they both have to go off the pitch, that's just common sense, or that guy's bleeding, don't let him play football. The fact that the players are allowed to kind of say, no, I feel okay, I think is bad. The fact that managers are involved means that you've got competing interests, shall we say. Like if they want Matthias de Ligt on the pitch, then they're going to do everything they can to get him on the pitch, even if he's bleeding from the head. None of that's ideal. I don't think there's a practical solution for it. I wish I had one. I don't think you can have like independent medical teams at stadiums, but it's clearly not how it should be. De Ligt should have gone off and been substituted and replaced, and then maybe Ethan Pinnock wouldn't have scored the header.
But he did. Cue Brentford fans singing, "You're getting sacked in the morning," even though their manager would probably be one of those lead amongst the replacements. But lost in the delirium of the Brentford scored too early huzzah was a fact that they lost to Manchester City and Tottenham and only drew a West Ham when they do their early scoring thing. This, by the way, this was them scoring in the last seconds of the first half, but they lived to fritter away points. Credit to that bald Dutchman, 90 seconds into the second half. After a tactical tweak, Dalot starting to play more inside than on the flank, driving play. Rashford arced a tantalising cross. I think he's quite an unheralded creator. And Garnacho, essentially scrappy-do Ronaldo, finished in his custom exclamation point style. Then Eriksen, I love that man, combining with an exquisite flip from Bruno sprung Højlund, who conjured his first league goal of the season with a cunning dink. What an impact his return could theoretically bring. Suddenly, that Ten Hag frown turned upside down, his entire front three working, contributing. United win a game of football, which feels almost as extraordinary as that dog spotted ascending the Great Pyramid of Giza. Ten Hag said after the game that they harnessed their madness and anger. So the good news for United fans, those are two emotions that they've got vast supplies of right now. Onwards, Ro.
Well, this is just, maybe, but is it not just the kind of the Erik ten Hag Manchester United rhythm that they are in crisis, then they get a couple of results that staunch the crisis. You draw with Porto, you draw with Aston Villa, then you win a game of football and people start talking about how you've turned a corner. You probably go and beat Fenerbahce and get one over on Jose Mourinho, by which time it's roughly time for the crisis to come back again.
It is. You know, I said this last week, United have last days of Wenger vibes where every win is a turning a corner, but there's so many corners Spurs' turn. You just keep perpetually circling around the block. Something similar, I hope, will not be said about Big Angie's Spurs. Rebound season this weekend for my spirit animal Postecoglou. Tottenham 4, West Ham 1. We all came to see how Tottenham, who gleaned just 10 points from their first 7 games, would react to a quite disconsolate Big Ange, admitting that the collapse in the last game against Brighton was the worst performance of his tenure. In this, he's always win trophies, second season mate. The good news, Son Heung-min back, recovered from a hamstring injury. In the first half, Spurs attacked their opponents with Ange-esque good intentions, throttle on full. But then West Ham simply rolled down into Spurs' box. First time they did, Spurs defenders neglected, I think, 3 or 4 opportunities to clear the ball, and Kudus smited it top corner. By the way, the faces of the Spurs fans behind his plastic seat as he did his trademark celly were just one of my moments of the weekend. For a moment, it did feel grim. 4th time this season, Tottenham have conceded first, but then the electric Kulusevski cut inside like a ginger iron robin, lashed home 3 goals in 8 second half minutes and changed the game. Lads, it's West Ham. Tottenham Stadium just turned from anguish to ecstasy. First a fine team move, Sonny delivering an exquisite ball to Friou Doggy, who set up Bissouma. Then a Todibo Areola confected own goal. 5 minutes later, ultimate joy. Sarr sprung Sonny, charged forward, executing stepovers like Sonaldo, lashed home. Massive second half for Big Ange. You had relief rolling off him like Bondi beach-sized waves. His big call that precipitated it. Raw, this was amazing. He took off James Maddison, who statistically had looked unstoppable in that first half, created 5 chances. Second best for him at Spurs all time. Replaced by Pape Sarr. It was a very in the moment Spurs fans, what is Ange thinking moment? But Sarr proceeded to just add collective to the pressing machine, a decisive pass too, changed the game. Can you explain it? Because it really was one of those moments at half time where football teaches us fans an important life lesson that we just don't know anything.
Yeah, well, funny enough, I think one of the most kind of significant substitutions of all time was in 2012 when Newcastle were drawing with Man City. Man City were going for the title with Man United. And Roberto Mancini took off a striker for a midfielder. And he got widely criticised. I can't remember who it was.
I'm getting annoyed listening. What's he doing?
Widely criticised as it was 0-0. You needed to win this game. And here he was apparently not throwing attackers on. But what he did was allow Yaya Toure to get further forward, which meant that Yaya Toure could score twice. City won 2-0, went on to win the league. And I think that we forget a little bit that sometimes the attacking player who you want to see can be playing well individually, as Maddison was, but perhaps there might be a different way around the problem. And what Postecoglou did was find that. Sarr, I thought, was excellent in that second half, really, really good. I think involved in the third or the fourth goal directly. But yeah, turned Spurs into a more complete unit. He did the thing that Spurs needed someone to do, that while Maddison was playing well enough individually, he wasn't adding to the collective endeavour.
It's a game of individualism. No, it's a game of collectives arced out by the great footballer. If you don't believe me, just look at a penalty in the 1994 opening ceremony. Diana Ross, we're all in the middle of a chain reaction. We're all looking for after midnight action. I don't know where that came from, but West Ham essentially coined a new phrase in this one: Spurs around and find out. We've got to touch upon it. The game ended with the quite wonderful violent farce of Kudos kung fu fighting everybody. Gave Van der Ven a trip and then proceeded to try and bung up his rear orifice with his foot up the bum and then scraping multiple faces. Got himself a red ultimately with VAR. But if you've not seen it, find this just to see Richarlison, a man who'd just come on and in the melee just fell so artfully without being touched, essentially seized the moment to reenact the entirety of William Dafoe's Sergeant Elias death scene in Platoon. It was Oscar winning.
Yeah, although that whole incident was bizarre because Mohamed Kudus did about 4 send-offable things in about 30 seconds, and I'm not quite sure why. I mean, players sometimes get a little bit het up about stuff, but I've never seen someone so determined to be like, I'm going to get sent off now. And
then he got originally, by the way, the thing I hate most in football is when the referees don't know what the hell is happening, they just give the offsetting yellows just to any random person from the other. Yeah, you get a yellow, and you know what, I'm going to give you one too. Yeah. It was
Everybody gets a yellow.
Yeah, but that is just that makes me rage. But go on.
Yeah, I don't quite know what came over Tudor, whether it's just the frustration of, more than a year playing for West Ham, not sure. Richarlison, I don't know. I think you might be a bit, unusually for you with Richarlison, I think you might be being a little bit harsh. It looked to me like he got sort of shouldered in the face as collateral damage, and it probably did hurt a bit. I think on the Sarr one, that when Sarr went backwards, he nudged somebody else who then, this is a chain reaction, who then nudged Richarlison with his shoulder. And I don't know, I know that you can say, they should all be kind of tougher, more macho, all that stuff. I as someone who would almost certainly fall over as soon as anyone touched my face, I sympathise.
God bless. By the way, Richarlison, who I do love so much, when he left Everton, I wrote a tribute to him where I said lots of lovely things just about, in massive moments, what he'd done for the club, the joy he'd given us. And then I finished it off by saying, and Spurs fans, you will enjoy his incredible ability to roll around on the floor in utter agony, as if he's just suffered a season-ending injury, and within seconds be bouncing up again with no harm done. And he retweeted it. So I think he even translated it all into Portuguese, which I loved. But once again, it's amazing that he survived. Medical science. Fifth defeat of the season for West Ham all comp, spent over $157 million in new arrivals this summer, but still had problems all over the field, lack any kind of evident identity under Lopetegui right now other than pain and sorrow and disappointment. Welcome, friends. Lovely weekend of respite and vindication for Big Ange. First ever win. This is incredible against a big London rival. Spurs up to 7th, point behind Chelsea. This game honestly like a body swap movie where West Ham played the role of Spurs in the Brighton game, and Tottenham needed this so very badly. Raw, they are an insane team. When they go 2-0 up, you feel like they are going to lose. But when they concede early, you just know they're going to open up a can of whoop-ass.
Yeah, I think Spurs are pretty good. I think that there's a weird thing with Spurs where, because they are it's a huge club, and their expectation is to kind of be in and around the Champions League, that they're kind of treated almost like the title contenders. But Spurs are not at that level. Spurs are not realistic challengers to win the league. They don't really have the budget to try and win the league. They shouldn't be expected to do that. And the way that kind of is expressed is through a little bit of inconsistency. So yeah, they've had a slightly disappointing start to the season in terms of results. I think overall performances have been pretty good. They play attractive football. They're fun to watch. They tend to score quite a lot of goals. And when they don't concede a lot of goals, they concede a lot of goals. They're just good to have around.
I have a huge soft spot for that team. And for another one who continues to soar with good vibes in sports. Levels only known previously to Ellie the Elephant. Fulham 1. Aston Villa 3. Something I had to give here. Fulham undefeated at Fortress Craven Cottage. Aston Villa undefeated on their travels. Really a fizzing wide open game initially of misdirection. 5 minutes in, Raul Jimenez surging of confidence. Route 1 goal, 10th goal in 12 Premier League starts. You throw in the one against the United States too soon, I know, but it is joyous to see that man feel dangerous again, almost like a Mexican Brennan Johnson. But Villa have a habit of conceding and coming from behind. They replied almost immediately. Morgan Rogers banking one in off Bassi. Fulham will ache every missed penalty. Pereira filing lamely almost straight into Emi Martinez's belly, and knowing Martinez and his modesty levels, he'll probably get a tattoo of the penalty save that downed Fulham somewhere on his body, probably in or around his taint. Ollie Watkins, a header from way downtown, Caitlin Clark range, and an own goal late, capped it off. Fulham, better than the result made them sound. Their fans no doubt ended up drowning their sorrows in a fine 2006 full-body Cabernet. But that only makes Villa really making this win look more routine, even more impressive. Unai Emery, best start to a Premier League season for that club after 8 games since 1989, beaten Bayern Munich, sprinkled in Champions League action. These are incredible days to be a Villa fan, Rob.
Yeah, incredible. And it's the ease the comfort, I suppose, with which they're doing it, that they do look like a team that can go to Fulham and win impressively. And that's no mean feat. As Fulham are good. They've had a great start to the season themselves. I think Villa have to be taken seriously, certainly as Champions League qualifying contenders again, possibly a little bit more. They've got a squad. They've got a great manager. They've got game winners amongst that squad. They've kind of got everything that you need, and they look so slick. That's
Real
the thing
squad
with
depth.
Villa. Yeah, they've
That's
got
the big
all the ingredients.
bloody difference. I love it. I love that Rory's hedging here. We can go back to this in 5 months' time when they're challenging for a title and not have him poo-poo that title challenge. But if they just fade away like Spurs last season or Newcastle, we'll say, yeah, but we didn't overcrown them. Raw. Only time will tell. In other games, talking about Newcastle, suddenly middling Newcastle 0, Brighton 1. One of those games in which you need a PhD in microphysics and luck sciences to understand the result. Increasingly inconsistent Newcastle, 21 shots, 2.01 expected goals, but unable to score. A reflection really of Alexander Isak's rustiness and Seagull's goalkeeper Bart Verbruggen's total excellence. Winner scored by the quite ageless Danny Welbeck, who's almost Tim Ream's age, carved out his 5th goal of the season. His milestone 100th goal contribution after a crafty exchange with Jorginho Ruta. Old man Welbeck later taken to hospital with back bruising. Newcastle stalling. No wins in 3. Chelsea upcoming. The mighty high-flying Seagulls are 5th. And God, this one we got to talk about though, Raw, because I feel their pain. Southampton 2. Leicester City 3. That noise that came out of you, and neither of us are Southampton fans, but this was dark because it all began so joyously. A team desperate for their first Premier League win. They went 2-0 up in the sun, propelled by Kyle Walker-Peters, but it's a trap. The perpetually naive Saints have dropped 8 points from winning positions this season, while the quite pragmatic Leicester under Steve Cooper have picked up 5 points after going behind. Fat Arwu came on for Leicester. He changed the game. They forced their way back in through Buonanotte with their first shot on target in the 64th minute. Jamie Vardy, who was coming on the show Tuesday morning, levelled with a penalty. And then in the 98th minute, who do they think they are? Manchester City. And are you, brother? Jordan, whom I think they exhumed just before they'd flung him on, rifled home from a training ground corner, which was passed to him by Winks Cuisines. 2 wins in a row for Steve Cooper. 21 games without a win in the Premier League now for the Saints. Just 1 point. This loss, Raw, somehow more painful than Leicester 9, Southampton 0 5 years ago.
Yeah, particularly because Southampton would have looked at this game before kick-off as a game they had to win to have any hope of avoiding relegation. You have to beat the teams that are around you. Leicester came up with them, so there's not that kind of sense of you're playing against a team that's much more experienced or much higher quality. That, you know, there's a degree of similarity between them. They played really well. Russell Martin's style, which he's been very clear he will not change, that worked perfectly. They had Leicester where they wanted them, and then not really because of any stylistic problem, just, I guess, like naivety, inexperience, maybe a little bit of lack of quality. They threw it all away, and it will feel like a real hammer blow for a team that must have been thinking this is the start of our kind of battle to stay up. To then suffer that defeat will be heartbreaking. And the other thing that I think needs pointing out, Abdul Fatawu, who came on for Leicester, who was on loan there last season, he emerged in Ghana 4 or 5 years ago as a really hot prospect, ended up at Sporting in Portugal, didn't quite click, which is why he ended up on loan at Leicester. But if that cameo is anything to go by, he's played in every game this season for Leicester, but the impact he made off the bench was astonishing. Southampton could not live with him. If he can find that level regularly, Leicester have got a real player.
God, I just felt for Southampton. Just like that old Dante quote that I often use in relation to Everton. There's never more painful than to remember a moment of joy in a time of sorrow. And to have that moment of joy and the time of sorrow in the same game is just an utter agony. Take it from me, a man who's seen their team do that 2-0 to 3-2 thing twice. You can survive, Saints fans. There is life after that shattering, back-breaking human pain. There is. ... I hope. Tonight, Nottingham Forest face the quite flailing Crystal Palace, who are still grappling with how to fill that Michael Olise-sized hole. I am just rooting so hard for Roy Hodgson 3. I can't even tell you, but let's end, as we so often do, or so often I wish we could do more, with the sound of Everton victory. Behold, Ipswich Town 0, Everton 2, a big game. Big game, possibly only though in the confines of the Men in Blazers hallways. As many of you know, my partner, producer J-Dubs, an Air Force brat growing up, was stationed in Suffolk. Lifelong Ipswich fan as a result. This then, the first ever Rog J-Dubs Classico, aka the Total Darkness Derby. Kieran McKenna, God bless you, 34 months ago took over Ipswich. They were 12th in the third tier of League One. Then the rise since has been majestic, but they haven't won since they returned to the Premier League. They have that brittle good intentions but shambolic backline. And were no match for Sean Dyche's trauma-hardened defensive crouch. Regular listeners will know that I do believe Everton sometimes are. Their mission is to be good for what ails you, but it was not to be, because I'm not going to celebrate this because I know too familiar with the pain that J-Dubs is probably feeling after this one. I actually felt little about the win out of my love for that man. I do ache for him. I have a soft spot for Ipswich, but this honestly could have been a League One game itself. Two quite awful teams playing. God bless Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I love that man, but my pulse has stopped raising when he goes in on a one-on-one. But can I just say, Ndiaye on the ball, raw. It's like watching Lethal Silk. On 70 minutes, he took advantage of, yes, woeful Ipswich defending, but just smashed the ball straight into the Ed Sheerans. Ndiaye, I have not seen a player this skill-soaked play for us since James Rodriguez's very fleeting cameo. I watch him, and my impulse is raw. I've never felt this before when I've been watching Everton. I watch him and I'm like, he's too good for us. We are not worthy. Which I'm aware in that moment, it's such a small club mentality. So I guess the question is, Raw, are we a small club now?
No, but Everton are a team that have got used, I guess, to the qualities that are needed for the context of their existence being a little bit more grit related than silk related. They've always needed steel rather than silk, to use the sort of journalistic cliche. Ndiaye, I think, has both of them. Is he not up there with the most ball recoveries in the league? He's obviously he's a workhorse, but then when he gets on the ball, he's got a little bit he can do with it, and that is in Everton's position, which is basically wanting to not be in a relegation battle. Having a player like that is vital, because he fits into the team. He does all the stuff that Sean Dyche wants, but he can win you football matches as well.
It's beautiful. I have been watching just essentially 11 men just grind out laps in a pool, just lap swimming, and suddenly the most exquisite, artistic, what's it called, that dancing in the pool stuff?
Synchronised swimming.
Yeah, just this gorgeous synchronised swimmer just suddenly appear. So I'm like, what? You can do something else in water other than just plough soullessly backwards and forwards. I love the new Ndiaye song. I'm in love. I can't deny. Our number 10, his name is Ndiaye. From Senegal to Bramley Moor, he's effing magic. The one we adore. And I also love how much he loves it. Posting himself singing it all over his socials. God bless you. By the way, when I said grit, not silk, or you said that, I realised that's also how Sean Dyche loves his underpants. But God bless you. The second goal, I do need to note quickly, Michael Keane, after some exquisite soft show shuttle from Quite McNeil, and Kinaldo just smashed the ball, walloped it, lathered and tethered it, left foot, just a est-wing hammer. I've never said a bad word about you, Michael Keane. Everton fans raw are now starting to believe was actually born a striker, because he clearly can't play defender. By the way, fascinated by this. All of us in our life have a moment when our life peaks and it will never get any better. We don't know when it is in the second. Probably mine was a long time ago. But do you think Michael Keane's life will ever get better than it did in that incredible moment?
Who knows? If someone starts playing him up front, which is where he's meant to be, maybe he'll have a sort of late in career reinvention as a prolific, burly target man. It might all just be beginning for
DCL
Michael
alongside Tark, you think?
Yeah.
Drop
DCL back, put Michael Keane up front, see what happens.
This is why you are an under-sevens coach now, or this is what you bring to the coaching fibre to come full circle. Tuchel may be England coach for now, but at the grassroots of the game, We're developing brilliant young tactical minds. Get yourself a tracksuit, Raw, and I might be able to make you the next Brighton manager. By the way, this was quite a comfortable win for Everton. Words I've never said on this show before. Deitch did his best to get Ipswich back into it, didn't make subs, seeds initiative, that's his way. But Ipswich go down again. They've never gone 8 games without a win in the top flight. Brentford and Leicester await. Those 2 games feel honestly like they're everything. Everton, this is amazing. First away win of 2024. When you hear that statistic, you're like, oh my God, how much crap have I watched and suffered through with my children in this calendar year? And most of them are by choice and Everton related. Thank you. 4 games undefeated. We might just have cured one of our biggest weaknesses, where we give struggling teams their first win, which we've done charitably for years. One final word from our listeners. Raven at meninblazers@gmail.com, from Susan Plano, from Santa Cruz, California. God bless the banana slugs. Rog, Rory Sounds. I like this one. Like such an erudite human being, so much more than football. I'm curious, and by curious I mean nosy. I'd love to know, does he have any hobbies outside of football other than family and pets? Does he have another passion? Courage, Susan. Susan, this is an incredible question. Send us your postal address. We will send you a patch. Keep your questions coming for raw@meninblazers@gmail.com. Rory Smith, the floor is yours.
I don't have another hobby. I'd be lying if I said I had a hobby. I quite like playing padel, which is what it's called, but not what people in England call it. So you have to call it paddle.
What do you call it in England?
Paddle, because otherwise
it's like English. It's like Euro pickle, as reimagined by what's his name?
It is not pickleball. I want to make that abundantly clear. It has nothing to do with pickleball. It's just a racket sport that you don't have to run around a lot in. But anyway, it's called padel. I think it's Brazilian. Everyone in the world calls it padel. In Britain, you have to call it paddle, otherwise people think you're trying to be foreign, and that is the worst thing you can do in England.
I want to play paddle.
But even that is maybe not a hobby. Do I have another passion in life? That's a good question. Ancient history would be my other passion in life, I suppose.
Is that true, Ro?
Yeah. That's quite sad, isn't it? Sorry.
No, it's beautiful, man.
Another thing I
Roaming
love.
around Hadrian's Wall and such, ruminating on where we went wrong.
I don't know if I'm doing that, and also Hadrian's Wall's very windy. You wouldn't go in the winter. That's the other thing that I find
ancient history. This is all Raw's way of giving us an advance warning. He's about to write Tim Ream's autobiography. God bless you, Raw. By the way, I do realise when I was talking about this, I watch so much football and work so madly right now in this kind of pre-2026 World Cup reality. We're getting up at 3:40 in the morning to interview Jamie Vardy tomorrow, which is the kind of idea that sounds so good in the moment.
I'm almost more impressed that Jamie Vardy's up at 9:40 in the morning.
That'd be 8:40.
8:40, yeah, 8:40, yeah.
By the way, it's going to be one of these. With the last player we did at this time was Aubameyang. We got up at 3:40. He didn't turn up till 11 o'clock. I've got a feeling we're on repeat for that one.
How many Red Bulls do you think Jamie Vardy's had by 8:40 in the morning?
That's question 1.
6.
That's number question 1. He'll be like, everyone asked me that. He'll be one of those. Oh, God, everyone asked me that. By the way, that's it. Regular listeners know I read. That I live for my dog, Martin Scorsese. The one thing I've never talked about enough, I do have a collector's mentality. Do you, Raw? Are you like a collector of crap?
Do you mean collector as a euphemism for hoarder?
Yeah, hoarder or non-hoarder, Raw?
Non-hoarder.
Neat freak. You're a neat freak.
I feel like freak is pejorative, but I'm quite a tidy person.
Neat freak only if you're a collector. I think if you are a neat freak, I wouldn't know, but I don't think you call yourself a neat freak, but I love it. Stand corrected. I've got an enormous collection of football vinyl, which I keep buying. I don't know what to do with it. Singles and albums recorded by football stars, teams, fans in the 70s, 80s and 90s. Used to be a lot more prevalent back in the day, dear listeners. I buy them insanely. Don't know what to do with them. I've got like Johan Cruyff's Polka single, which is actually really surprisingly good.
I think you're probably doing enough just preventing other people listening to them, Roger.
I'm buying them up. So then, by the way, I own them all. One day I want to do some kind of an exhibition or a book. By the way, Raw, last one, best football track ever in your mind? Quick one on the spot.
World in Motion.
God, I would agree. Yes, right answer by New Order.
Yeah.
And the England 1990 World Cup team. If you don't know what that is, go and listen to it, listeners. You are I mean, my God, a treat. I'm going to let you get back to the Byzantine era of Liverpool Football Club and your archaeology and your excavations, Raw. That is it. We will be back with European Nights tomorrow. We got Jamie Vardy and the great Jack Grealish dropping on our YouTube this week. Raw, we'll be back next week after that Arsenal-Liverpool rumble. Huge love to you, you Crown Prince of Harrogate.
It's been a pleasure.
This is Rog sending you big love. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted, and courage.